Hello, lovers of nature and wildlife. This is Dr. Parvish Pandya, Director for Science and Conservation with the Sanctuary Nature Foundation. And it gives me immense pleasure to introduce to you Miss Belinda Wright. She's been a tiger protector, conservationist, and a fearless crusader. Belinda was born in Kolkata, and this warm-hearted conservationist is the founder and executive director of the Wildlife Protection Society of India, which is acronymed as WPSI. A dyed-in-wool wildlifer, she's a renowned tiger conservationist and wildlife campaigner who has pioneered investigations into wildlife trade in India, Nepal, Bhutan, China. She has also organized hundreds of uncounted wildlife enforcement and anti-poaching workshops and skill shares for a range of professionals ranging from forest, police, custom officials, and so on. She helped discover and expose the trade in shahtoosh and its connection with the tiger bone trade, tracked tiger skins from India to Tibet plateau, and has worked to stop the slaughter of sea turtles off the coast of Orissa and the poaching and electrocution of wild elephants. Daughter of Anne Wright, a wildlife activist whose work spans half a century, she virtually grew up in the Kanha National Park, where her father, the late Bob Wright, and Anne set up a home to be with and protect the wild animals the family so loved. Passion for tiger and the natural world runs deep in Belinda's veins. A prolific writer, she has been a wildlife photographer and a documentary filmmaker for National Geographic for nearly 2 decades, having worked on more than a dozen wildlife films. The 1984 documentary, Land of the Tiger, produced by her and Stanley Breeden, won her 2 Emmy Awards and 14 other major international awards. She founded the WPSI in 1994 to draw focus on the precipitous decline in India's wildlife. And also in November 2012, Belinda was the recipient of the Sanctuary Lifetime Service Award. With this brief introduction, let's all welcome Miss Belinda Wright, a fabulous person by herself, and her heart beats for India's wildlife and biodiversity. Thank you, Belinda, for being here. It's so lovely to have you on this platform. So my first question for you today is, what inspired you to start the Wildlife Protection Society of India, WPSI?
I think, I know the moment I decided I had to do something. That was when I had absolute positive evidence that there was large-scale tiger poaching happening, and people didn't know about it, and certainly the authorities weren't in the slightest bit, interested in even recognizing the problem. It was the 30th of April, 1994, and I went to a PCO booth about 2 hours from my home in Kanha, and the guy didn't know who I was, and I leant forward to make a phone call. In those days, that's what you did. And when I'd finished the phone call, which I had in English, I didn't speak Hindi at all. And when I finished the phone call, he just leaned forward and said to me, "Are you interested in tiger skins?" And I looked at him, and my initial reaction was to grab his throat and go through the drama. And instead, I narrowed my eyes and said, "I'm not, but I know somebody who is. How many do you have?" And I couldn't believe that I was doing this. Anyway, I did that, and he said he had 4. So I turned around and walked fairly calmly away. And my car was parked, my Jeep was parked around the corner, and I took off. And then I drove another an hour and a half or something to Balaghat. And I called a friend in Delhi and said, "What do I do?" And the long and the short of it is that actually I got in touch with the second person I got in touch with was Ashoka Kumar. He sent down somebody to help me. And I never looked back after that.
Wow.
So I put away my cameras and overnight changed my life. Yeah.
Super. Did being a woman in this male-dominated work area make things difficult for you?
Not at all. In fact, I think they in many ways helped me. Certainly, when I was doing stings with the enforcement authorities, it was perfect because the criminals who I was meeting and talking to, they didn't feel threatened by a woman, number one. And they didn't know I knew anything about tigers, anything about India, the languages, or anything. So, they were all men that I worked with. I mean, there were a few scientists came up later, but if you know your facts well, if you know your subject well, then people respect that. And they were pretty good to me. Sometimes it was a bit offhand in a meeting in Delhi or something, but in the field, I found people were really good. And in fact, forest officers and things would go out of their way to protect me from a few examples of the less nice members of the specimens of the species. But I'm very proud of being a woman, and if it's helped others to come into this field or whatever, I think that's wonderful. And I think for most men, they know that women are pretty good and pretty determined. So, yeah.
All my students who are females and into the wildlife field, they'll be so happy to hear that. Literally, I would say. Can you tell us something about your experiences when you were making the Land of the Tiger?
Well, they just had to be the most wonderful years of my life. We spent 2.5 years just following tigers from dawn until dusk. And we were covering these two magnificent tiger reserves, Kanha and Ranthambore, at a time when there were virtually no visitors and we could go anywhere. Build machans, walk, drive. I mean, it was really quite an extraordinary time. And I feel very, very, very privileged to have experienced that. And I feed off those memories, believe me. I mean, they're very inspiring to me with when I'm sitting at a computer and I've got a report to write and I'm feeling sort of down. I've got some wonderful memories to rely on.
Super. And what are your views on the Project Tiger as a project itself?
Well, I think when Project Tiger was launched, I think it was the most ambitious and probably the largest wildlife conservation project the world had ever known. It really was quite something. And the objective was quite a straightforward, simple one. It was to protect the tiger's habitat in 9 specially selected areas. It was extraordinarily successful. I call those the sort of golden years, 1973 to the late 1980s, the golden years of the tiger. The problem happened when new threats came and they were not recognized, and then things started to fall apart.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And how did your career start with the National Geographic?
I was very young. I mean, but I had been working, I've worked in wildlife, since the moment my eyes opened and I could crawl. I seemed to be, so I was, at the time, I was working in Nepal at Tiger Tops and learning lots of marvelous tiger skills from Dr. Chuck McDougall, a wonderful man. And then I got this message inviting me to join a National Geographic project, but more as a sort of guide than anything else. And I was a budding photographer. So, and the project was to no expenses spared, and to cover all of India, which hadn't been done, and go to all these amazing places, and many of which I'd been to. But I mean, it was a sort of heavenly project. But initially, I said no, and because I was sort of insulted about not being able to photograph. So then my mother bullied me. She sent messages. There was no phones up there, but she sent messages. And eventually, in January, a couple of weeks later, they said, okay, I could also photograph as well. So then I came down and joined this marvelous 18-month project. And it was, I did all the driving. I drove 4 times from Delhi to Kanyakumari, and then to Assam. I mean, all over, and I had little bubbly muscles. I was, yeah, it was absolutely amazing. And then after that, I met my husband during that project. He was an Australian National Geographic photographer and writer, and after that, we decided to make films. I longed to be in one place and really get to know it and get to know, the individual animals rather than be hopping around. But National Geographic weren't very thrilled with this idea. They believed that still photography was one career and filmmaking was another. So we started making wildlife films for other companies, Survival Anglia, BBC, and so on. And then eventually we were invited back to National Geographic as filmmakers. So that was pretty exciting.
I can never forget how many times I've shown your movie, The Birds of the Indian Monsoon, to so many people.
Yeah. That was one of our first films. And that was it was very difficult. Nobody wanted films on birds in those days. And we couldn't find a sponsor. And eventually the US Fish and Wildlife Service very kindly sponsored it, because you won't believe this, but Bharatpur, which was then a wildlife sanctuary, not a park. And there was a move by the state government, the then state government, to denotify it. And Salim Ali was an extremely close friend. And we met him on one of his visits to Delhi to talk about this. And because I loved Bharatpur. And I said, well, why don't we make a film about it? A really fabulous film to bring the place alive. And he said, brilliant idea. And I will make sure that the film is premiered at the IUCN meeting, the big IUCN meeting that happened in Delhi. And I can't remember what year that was. 79?
Must be 1983.
Oh, maybe it was. Yeah. I've got it all down. In fact, I can look it up. I've got it beside me. And so we made the film, and it really, it's such a wonderful place. You can't go wrong, really. And then at the end of the showing, the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, sent her secretary to call us, and we came forward, and she said, would you very kindly come and show me the film again at my house, because I'm sure my family would love to see it. And so we said yes. So we went, and we had this golden opportunity to be able to talk to her, to say how vulnerable this place was. And in the meantime, Salim Ali, who she was deeply fond of, so the poor Prime Minister was sort of, bullied from all sides. And within 2 weeks of that meeting and those 2 viewings, it was declared a national park. So there was nothing that anyone could do. It was a national park. So she upgraded it, which was, fabulous. Yeah.
Fantastic. Just falling out of that comment of yours, my next question is, do you think we need to have better wildlife conservation laws in India?
actually, I think I'm very, very familiar with the Wildlife Protection Act and its history. And I think actually it's a very good law. It's one of the strongest and most comprehensive wildlife laws, probably in the world. The problem is in the implementation, not in the law. And I think it certainly could be tweaked on a number of issues, such as exotic animals and things like that, which is very pertinent to the pandemic that's happening worldwide now. But it's a good law. Believe me, it's a good law.
And what do you think about the local communities, some which protect or some which push species towards extinction?
I like people as well as animals. I'm one of those rare conservationists that genuinely likes and gets on extremely well with local people. And when somebody asks me a question like you have, I would put myself into their shoes. Now, in many, many, many areas of India, the national parks and tiger reserves, the well-known ones that are being used by a lot of tourists, are seen as something where the door has been shut on the local people. And these are just wealthy people going in and laughing and this and having a jolly time and whatever. The real issue of survival, climate change, pollution, biodiversity and stuff, none of that has been explained to them. It's not even in, they've kind of been, from a knowledge point of view, the local people have been pretty much ignored. And I think we have missed an absolutely golden opportunity to make, particularly the very knowledgeable ones. I'm thinking of the Bega tribals in Kanha, okay. Much of the knowledge has now been lost in the last 20, 30 years. But I think we missed a golden opportunity to make the most incredible wildlife warriors you could ever imagine, because they had knowledge and they have emotion, but they think differently maybe from an educated person or from a person from Delhi or South India or whatever. And it was just a matter of, not just, that's a wrong word. It was a matter of somebody thoughtful, sensitive, trying to funnel that passion and that knowledge into a direction that would hugely benefit these protected areas. And at the moment, the bikers, they're not even used as guides. I mean, they're from that area. They're part of the soil, the land. And this is true in many parts. So they are part of the problem, because now, another thing that people forget is that around tiger reserves, they're mostly meat eaters. So a lot of the local poaching for bushmeat is done by local people. So they are part of the problem, but they could have been, and maybe could still be. I mean, I'm the biggest optimist you'll ever meet in your life. Part of the solution. And if they want to continue to be meat eaters, which I'm sure they will, there are other ways of doing it rather than going out poaching, because the forest for them is like a free supermarket. But that can be changed if they're given the dignity, the respect, and an income to live on, and all that sort of thing. Anyway, that's a long story, but I
super.
I understand what the question.
So, did you get some of these ideas from Dalai Lama, and how did you involve him in your mission for wildlife conservation?
Oh, he is an extraordinary man, a human, a fabulous, fabulous human being. So I have to go back a little bit. By 2005, the whole poaching of tiger skins and poaching for tiger skins and bones went into organized crime. It was no longer a haphazard thing. It became very slick, and I was working on many cases. And apart from a few of the major traders' names that would come up, I was trying to find out what the demand was for and so on. And we knew a bit, but not very much. We weren't quite sure of the routes and so on. And slowly this information started coming together. And in 2005, it was in January 2005, January is always a good month for me, Deb Banks of EIA, who I'm sure you know and love, she rang me from London and she said, you're having a tough time and, how can we help? And I said, Debbie, we need to go to China. She said, what? And I said, yes, I want to go to Tibet. I want to follow this. And 5 months later, we were in Tibet. And that was when, it was just extraordinary. We went to these, I had just one or two little clues, but we went to these horse festivals and people were wearing these fresh tiger skin, fresh leopard skin chubas, these kind of wonderful robes. And they all of them from India. And we talked to the traders that they weren't, it was openly done. And we counted about 85 fresh tiger skins in our 6 weeks was it 3.5 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever in Tibet. And so we put together a report. It had still pictures, a lot of facts, and we had video footage and so on. And we gave a copy to the government of India and a copy to the government of China. The government of China's reaction was immediate. And they said, this is fake. And the reason they gave for this whole report being fake was that nobody in Tibet wears dark glasses. Everybody in Tibet wears dark glasses because it's very high and very bright, the sunshine. Anyway, I thought that was quite amazing. And in India, people were sort of incredulous. They just kept saying, this cannot be from India. But the evidence was all there. So we didn't really know what to do. So there was a journalist, a visiting journalist, who I'd known for some time. And he had already got a meeting with the Dalai Lama coming up. So we said, can we combine it with this information? And the Dalai Lama, when he saw the photographs, he was so upset, not just about the animal skins, by the way, but about the ostentatious jewelry, the gold, the huge corals, and I mean, it was sort of over the top. And he was deeply upset. You could tell. And he took the pictures. Said, "Can I keep them?" And we said, "Of course." And then he said, "We will do something." And then, not long after that, there was the big Kala Chakra, which happens every 12 years in the Tibetan cycle. And that was in Amravati that year, in 2006, also January. And suddenly, we had, I didn't go, but we had some Tibetan translators who worked for us. And so they took part, and we had printed some posters about this journey in Tibet and the skins and how destructive this was and so on. And suddenly the Dalai Lama started talking about these terrible scenes he'd seen from Tibet. And there were, something like, I don't know, over 20,000 people there, many of whom had come from Tibet. And so somebody asked him, what's the solution? And he said, you need to burn them. You need to get rid of this. This should not be in your lives. So that's what happened. But the Chinese were furious. They were very upset. But historically, it was very interesting because it was the first time when the Tibetan people obviously had done something in response to what he said. It was quite, I mean, it was, yes. So the tigers are complicated, complicated species. You know, she has lots and lots of interesting sort of wonderful web around its life, including that.
And how does the future of tigers now looks for you?
Oh, despite all the evidence to the contrary about anything to do with Indian wildlife and our wild areas, I continue to be an optimist. I continue to believe that a political knight in shining armor who really feels for wildlife and feels for nature will put things right. I think my great sadness is what happened in Suriska and Panna. And my fear that something like that can always happen again. I mean, the last tiger, Suriska tiger, was seen, I think, in August 2004. And then Panna happened much more slowly. People knew, everything was known. Now, the problem in both those cases, and the problem as I see it, is that if managers and the authorities don't accept there is a problem and deny it even exists, then how can they put it right? And that can happen over many, many, many different instances to do with the future of the tiger and India's wildlife. We just have, you know, I don't know how your audience or you or me can help put this right, but we need to, you know, I'm sort of speechless at the moment, you know. I think it's possible, but it's a hard road ahead.
So that brings me to the last question. There are lots of our students and teachers watching you as a role model. What would be your message to them? What should they do?
Well, I wouldn't change 1 second of my life, even the difficult bits. And, you know, I wake up each morning saying, wow, another lovely day, even though I've got far too much work or some drama to sort out. And the reason for that is that I am truly passionate and dedicated to what I do. I am not interested in a big bank balance or anything like that. I think that would be my one bit of advice. Whatever you do, do it because you are passionate about it and it really means something to you. And then I guarantee there will be problems along the way, but you, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm 68, damn it, but you will not have any regrets. You will not feel bitter. You will have a good and great and useful life. So that's, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I would advise.